And we're live! Hello, Internet. This is Flip for the Win on Watercourse A10C by Zungryware. I said I'd do a quick review of this map. I'm just going to walk through it, give some of my opinions, thoughts, personally what I do to adjust. I want to preface every recording, well, not every recording, but I want to preface this criticism, let's put it like that, with the idea that I really do not want to bully a map maker into making my version of the map. The reason that a map maker is they have their own vision of what makes the map great and their own vision of what gameplay they want to create. So I'm really just trying to provide an opinion, and ultimately what I'm trying to do is I'm going to provide some insight, and I want to convince you that my idea is better. If I don't convince you, then the idea wasn't strong enough, or you have your own vision that you should trust and follow. So don't default to my advice or opinion or my feedback unless it actually makes sense. Okay, we're just going to go through the map from an attacker perspective. I'm just going to go over tons of details, small nitpicky things, but if I want to give an overall summary of what I think the problem with the map is, I think you have a routing problem where instead of 3 choke, I'd actually make it 2.5 to 2, and then I'd want to make my main combat space satisfying. And that's the crucial thing. So your main combat space currently, I think, is not very attacker favored, or it ends up being not encouraged. The attackers aren't really encouraged to feed into this nice main choke you made, so it ends up you get a lot of flank combat. And then I already ranted on the server about there's a flank on last, which I'm sure I'll get angry about and rant about. Okay. So, blue spawn details. All spawn cabinets in good positions. I can't spam out or abuse using any of them in any sight lines, so good positioning there. Shutters, I think they open a little bit slow if I try to abuse them, but otherwise I think they're completely fine. One thing I'm not really super happy about, like, first off, this main window looks great, I kind of like it, but I almost feel like the other doors need a window as well. Like, the transition from the spaces is kind of bad. I would like a window right here, and I'm always worried about the peeker's advantage where you have a one-way window and then you have a player peek and shoot the target that they see through the one-way window. That sniper pre-aiming is really, really annoying, and people generally don't like dying to that. But you cover it very well on the left-hand side. This is fair both ways. On the right-hand side, I think you managed the sightline okay. I know it's A10, whatever, it's still alpha, but you have some kind of weird gaps. And then also, this is like alpha complaint, right? But when you have dev textures like this, it's really hard to make out silhouettes and distances because they kind of get broken by the same texture onto the back wall. So especially when you detail, you'll want to break those into different textures. But you can see there's still some kind of peaky sight lines, which are a little bit annoying. It's not really anything too offensive, though. For this right door, I would personally like at least a window in it, even though you're not in a sight line, especially because you're not in a direct sight line here. It's okay to give vision, and it just helps someone not feel like they're face planting into a wall when they know what's coming through the door. Especially when you're out of your spawn, I really don't like spawn door combat. Okay, so in terms of routing, your far left routing is really fine. I like the pre-door. It makes it safe. This doorway, I don't really like how it comes at an angle, but I don't really have a huge correction for it. And then the door that really breaks the spawn hole, that high ground on the spawn hole, is obviously this right-hand side. And Pig said he liked this. Personally, I personally think it should come out on high ground to help break the spawn hold, but I also am not really sure how I completely manage the sightlines here. You already have a lot of rocks everywhere. But the gameplay flow of this door is that you basically, every forward hold is almost always broken by a sniper. Just the sightlines are too extreme for the defenders to cope with when they have infinite respawns and just so you're able to spam out a door. So sniper normally just rotates out here is the way I think about it, and this is essentially what breaks the hold because there's no way to really push the sniper. And that is completely fine. I think it is good. It transitions to a very easy to break hold. But my biggest problem with this is I feel like this route doesn't convert into anything after you get the hold, right? So I'm a sniper, I've broken the hold, right? And then I want to continue to advance. My best option is actually to rotate back, probably completely this way, snipe this, or go all the way back up. What I can't do is I can't convert to the high ground. So I'm going to talk a little bit about basic pub design, my principles of pub design, or at least how I think about it. There are two really important things. You want to make it so that someone feeding will be able to contribute still to the team, but that's the core of pub design. You're going to have like 8 players who feed, and then 4 players who are maybe thinking about the macro game, trying to time their pushes with waves, or maybe trying to time an uber push with the respawn waves, right? So I always think of it as 4 players trying to play TF2, and then there's 8 players just having fun. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's pub design. But the problem is you need to make sure those feeding players get led in the right direction. And one of the problems with the spawn exit door is there's no conversion into space. So Shunik says there's 2 principles that he kind of believes that most maps have most map designers have a problem violating. One of them is distance to combat, where if I'm back here, right, and I'm players over there, unless I'm a sniper, there's no way I can fight that. If I see someone, I want to be within fighting range, right? So it's fine out of a spawn range, but because you want a spawn to be something that is dominated by sniper and blue takes the space, and then the combat over the doors is fine. But the other problem, which I think is more major, is if you have a high ground location, right, you want players to be able to think how do I get to that and see an immediate route there or have an easy way to get up? And if I rotate here, right, if I rotate out the right spawn door and I want to transition to high ground, I have to go back or I have to go right into sightline back left, and you see that's like really, really ugly. So personally what I would do, I was going to do suggestions last, but personally what I would do is I would consider adding a high ground rotation basically up or just like that. So this right route out of spawn has a high ground option to rotate to, right? Because main, you don't really have any problems. You can see high and low ground rotation. Okay. Let's continue forward. I kind of want to go left to right, just kind of on principle, but I'm going to jump around and talk about a lot of stuff. So nothing really offensive about the spawn area. I think it transitions quite nicely into, I want to call it your connected lobby, but I'm not really sure there's a good term for this. The one thing I would say is, I know it's an alpha map, but there's some like really awkward areas. Like this clutter doesn't really make sense. This kind of like a gapped corner. This gapped corner also doesn't really make sense because it's just going to get people caught and stuck. There was a clipping issue that I thought was actually pretty major right here on this doorway. It might just be a 1 unit off. I'm getting caught right there, so I'm actually holding forward and getting stuck. So just worth noting, you know. This design, like, oh man, I know, again, it's alpha, right? But what is the purpose of this gap? And this is like, when I used to do reviews with competitive players, one of the things I thought was really funny is they'd stare really intently. They'd look at this box and be like, what is the purpose of this box? But it's actually really clever, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to look at it and think, how can I use this? What is the potential of this box? For me, I might say, okay, this enables a rotation up like that, but it doesn't. So whenever you have a route and a place, you really need to think what the purpose of this is, just in terms of intention. That's part of why I love reviewing with competitive players, and I also hate them. But me personally, I see this and I think, like, this is just annoying shit to get stuck on, especially because it's a 45. I think there's a good chance you can kind of slide off this. I could be wrong, but I don't really see the purpose of why you wouldn't just make this full flush. Like, is there a particular reason you made a pit here? Maybe someone backing out can get caught. I know they weren't spawn holding here anyway, but it's just kind of awkward. One of the principles of Highlander, I know, why is he talking about Highlander in the pub design? Because it's worth thinking about. You don't really get to choose the experience of your players. And one of the principles of Highlander that I do want to talk about is the concept of valuing your own life. So I just kind of mentioned most of the time you have 8 or 10 players feeding, and generally have 1 or 2 players who are playing the macro game who actually care about their life. And what that's going to look like is realizing spawn waves, realizing their team is dead, you know, by the funny top bar I have up top, and then also realizing where you're caught and where you're not caught. So one of the really important things in Highlander is when you have a really, really powerful sniper, right? Medics basically need to play where they can't play in, where I never want to cross the sightline, right? So right here, I would say your exit is caught if you're fighting in here because of that sightline. I'm just explaining the purpose now. In this spawn area, it doesn't really matter, but it's going to be relevant later when I talk about other areas. So I think this is a good area. It prevents players from being too far forward. Mainly, this is just kind of poke out, but really the attacking team should get to this door, and that lower door for basically free token resistance, right? Now let's talk about actual combat transition space into lobby and then the actual rooms you're looking at here. I think this room comes really far out for what it is. The only reason you would lengthen out the distance here is because you're worried about the defending team pushing up to this space. But if anything, I think it's fine for the defending team to be here and then just rotate back. And even if they push up to that high ground, right, they're vulnerable to the route behind them and their exit is caught. So I don't really think this room needs to be so deep. Maybe you did it for scale. And then again, this space is kind of really awkward. Maybe this is something you're going to cut out in alpha, but right now, you see, especially because of the way the door's inset, it's very easy to get caught, very awkward to get stuck there. And these packs are actually very unattractive too. Medium ammo with small health is usually a weird combination. I don't really know why I see it that much. Another thing, oh man, it's always difficult to transition a 45 into on grid, but I don't like when you have any route where to take a staircase to transition, I now have to do an out and in. I call this a Z. I don't like the Z very much. So that left route, I think it's fine. The way it boils in is fine. I would prefer if this came out more connected into the lobby, but I think where it comes out is fine. I'm just a little bit worried about the sightline coming out this doorway, right? Because your doorway's in a major sightline. So I always want my doorways to be protected, because doorway combat, the way doorway combat should work is you clear through the door, right? So I see someone there, I fight through it, and then I walk through it, right? I think this door is a really good example of that, right? I can see the space, I know if there's someone there, and then I don't really know if someone's there. If there's a crossfire the other way, it'd be perfect, because that person clears my side, this person clears that side. I'm gonna get rid of this guy, right? So there's a soldier here. Let's just say he clears that side, right? And as a player here, I can see him shooting there, right? If he started walking forward, okay, I know it's clear for him, and I can clear this side. I know it's clear for me. And when you have a crossfire where you each clear each other's doors by accident, that accidental teamwork in TF2 is exactly what you want in pubs. I think pubs is the core of pubs is when players accidentally cooperate, right? And if your map makes that happen, it's beautiful. So if this left flank somehow pinches these players here and relieves tension, and that lets a player walking up this side walk in and take advantage of that space made, that's the juice of attack defense, and especially on attack, that's what makes people, that's what gets their blood pumping. All right, let's talk about this main route. So you only have one route up to the main. I talked about this before. It clears one side, right? So you clear the right side, and then rotating in to see the left is very difficult, but they're sort of pinched. That's okay. I think what's a little bit more offensive is this lower route. As I mentioned, this lower route is kind of awkward because it's the only way the players out right spawn go. And then when you're rotating up here, I really don't like this sort of combat space. Not the height disadvantage. The height disadvantage doesn't offend me. The problem is the potential to have to do a 180. That's always really awkward when you have to fight players directly above you. Luckily, this isn't that bad because the sightline majorly prevents people from being here, but that also makes it really difficult to deal with as a defender because you don't see these players. You can see they're basically invisible, and then they just pop up above. And then this route, I'll go over this later, but I straight up think it should just be deleted. There's no reason to have a route like this, and I think you could bring in the combat space into a closer choke, kind of like an hourglass, and that would really condense your combat instead of spreading it out, kind of like a line, more like granary. But in terms of this route, one of the principles I do want to talk about design, I mentioned having your exit caught, right? And that includes flanks as well. So basically, a basic principle of defensive TF2 holds is you cannot have a legitimate stronghold any further forward than the deepest infiltrating flank. It's just a statement of fact. For starters, TF2 is a game where you cannot fight multiple enemies at the same time. If there's two chokes, right, I can't fight this guy and this guy at the same time, right? Or similarly here, the reason I said that's fine, even though it might be hard, is you can't really clear from the side, is because this area gets pinched. You can't fight right and you can't fight left at the same time. So any area that gets pinched by that sort of crossfire is made slightly weaker just by consequences of rounding. So I do think it's okay in terms of that side. This side, I don't really like the inability to fight players, and this is going to be some really awkward staircase combat, and maybe it's just the steepness as well that causes them to kind of poke up very quickly. But okay, let's talk a little bit about glass, because you use a lot of glass. I was going to talk about this a little bit later. I mentioned this in one of my earlier reviews, but when you use glass, you create, you have the potential to create degenerate combat. Let's just start there, right? I could be a demo man with 8 seconds on the doorway. I could be watching. There's nothing you can do about it. I could be a sniper. I could be pre-aiming, and the second I see you, I just peek, and then I go back to charging. And it breaks the ability to work as a... Well, it breaks the ability to have, like, choke spam. So if, like, I know you're there, right, I can pre-fire the shit out of this corner without needing to have any sort of, like, intuition or really any counter ability from classes that, you know, can't pre-fire and the like. But the good thing about it is when players are learning your map, so when you made a map for the first time and everyone that was on it has never played it before, they learn your map super quickly because the entire thing's transparent, right? But once you start playing more, I think glass gets in the way of cooperative teamwork, where instead of having the need for a player to, like, watch this and watch that and then care about different routes being pressured, they can see the routes themselves. So this is more of a problem the higher level you go. I think if you want your map to be purely a pub map, it's fine, but I think you should keep in mind the danger of using vision like this. The more vision you add, the less of deliberate teamwork you need. So I know I mentioned pubs and accidental teamwork, but I'll just be careful about that because, you know, if you add too much glass and people are able to rotate just by seeing it, it can feel helpless as an attacker. Because as an attacker, you're poking all these different directions, right? But if the defender constantly sees you through glass that you can't do anything about, and they're a smart defender and they rotate to meet you every single time, it's annoying. You're like, okay, well, they can literally see me and I can't do anything about that. It's like they have an invisible spy calling my direction all the time, right? That I can't do anything about. Okay, so that's kind of like the brief overview. We're into lobby of the first. Jesus Christ, flip, speed up. Let's talk about this transition. First off, you have I call this a staging area, right? A staging area is when you have a setup. You can imagine it as the first place where your engineer might put a teleporter, might put a sentry gun. And the important thing about your staging area is that it contains the rotations to your other routes, right? So you start pushing from your staging area, you build up Uber in your staging area, and if the attacking team pushes into your staging area, then it's defendable, right? That's really important. So you can't be knocked out of your staging area, or if you are knocked out of your staging area, it's really, really difficult. If you want to learn more about this, watch the video I did on Shorelight, because I think I talk a lot about it there. But essentially, this is your staging area. This is where you want to kind of set up, and then you want to rotate into your pushes from it. So let's talk about what options you have. Let's start with this left one. I mentioned before, I'm a little bit concerned about the sightline. The other thing is, I know it's alpha, you added a prop here, but one of the things you have to keep in mind when you add a prop like this is people want to be away from the corner when they peek the sightline, unless there's a sniper, right? So they're gonna basically be hugging this prop while they walk here, and because it's, you know, because it's alpha, it's really bumpy, and that's a little bit problematic. But it's not the end of the world. One of the things I think is really more awkward about this transitional space is you have this pitted area where there's so much corners and stuff to get stuck on, but the purpose of the route itself, right, is to deeply infiltrate. As I mentioned before, the defending team cannot hold any further forward than the deepest route. And I'll talk about the reason why this route is attractive. So one of the things pub players absolutely love is if someone shoots at them, they are going to go chase that person, right? That's step one. And then step two, they love it when they know where the direction of combat is, right? So I didn't want to talk about this, but I'll talk about this now, right? So if I come out this doorway, there's attackers who could be on the left, there's attackers who could be on the right. I have a blind corner left and I have a blind corner right? Overall, that makes this door horrendously unattractive, even with the glass, right? I really don't want to push out this door, because I could be getting shot from the left, I could be getting shot from the right. I have no idea if there's attackers close or attackers far, like there and there. Even if they are far, right, it could be a class I can't do anything with, like if there's a sniper there and a sniper there, right? So this door is very, very miserable to push out of, despite it being open, right? And then you go to this door, right? I know I'm safe all the way to that corner, right? And then once I'm here, the attackers can only be one direction. They're in front of me. There's like no other option. They're from there to there, somewhere behind that space, right? So it's very pleasant simply because it's a short tunnel. I mentioned this before, tunnels aren't problematic. The problem is when you have the tunnel go a long route behind. I'll go over that later, right? But let's do a little bit of a flip-flop here and talk a little bit about defending and having your exit con. So I gave this advice to Altitude, and I think it was kind of ignored, but when you play Highlander, there's really not a concept of a wipe. Well, I mean, so there is, right? But if you wiped, you really messed up. Most of the time in Highlander, what happens is a team pushes, they get like 4 or 5 significant picks, and unless it's a really point that's meant to be hard held, the defending team backs out, right? So they don't wipe, they cut their losses, they recuperate, they rebuild, and then they reset on the next point, right? So in Payload, let's just pick an example, Badwater, right? Badwater, you lose first, you transition into second, and second is often very soft held. You lose second, and then you transition back into third. Each time, you'd only lose like 2 or 3 players, and then you rotate back. Maybe like 5 players, you trade 5 for 5, right? And then attacking team with the better spawn timers obviously can come up and abuse that advantage. So the problem with doors like this is if I'm an intelligent player, right, I'm playing somewhat sensibly, right, I'm holding my flank really well, and oh, they pushed out on the far flank, I couldn't see, I don't have anything to do with that, right? I see them pushing in, they have like a heavy medic, they have a soldier, oh my god, their entire combo's there, my entire team's dead, right? Okay, it is time to leave, right? It's time to leave, and oh no, my exit is sealed, because I am not allowed to leave until the point is capped. And I am not going to be able to get out in time, because that is a slow cap, I'm stuck in this corner, someone is going to come fight me, and I feel like I've been cucked by the map. Yep. Simple reality of what happens when you have a point that only opens a door that opens after the point is capped. The reason you do this, I get it, it's because A, you don't want people to get lost, and B, you don't want flankers to be rats going really far behind, right? But I think the reality is the best thing to do with flankers going behind is to have hourglass shape. Once again, if that player is going behind, he's coming back into the players that are rotating, and I'll go over that later. But the solution is not to have one-way doors like this, because this is just problematic when it means nobody can be playing on that side of the map when any point is held. So in Highlander, again, Flip, why do you keep talking about Highlander? If I was playing as a medic, it is literally infeasible for me to play here, because I can't exit here, I can't cross a sight line. So the only place I'm allowed to play is probably in this door, probably even further back, because I'm scared of the left sight line. So yeah, I'd just be like here the entire time. I would literally just sit here with my glass, with my thumb in my mouth, just stuck in it, just unable to do or peek or do anything interesting, no ability to rotate. So yeah, I don't know. I would just consider rethinking this. I have an idea for how I transition to this space later, but I want to go over other routes as well. So I mentioned this before. I think it's very hard. I mentioned you want to clear a door and then push through it, right? You can't clear this door. First off, it's too wide. But at the same time, you would think they couldn't hold it, right? But the problem is there's a huge amount of dead zone before you pressure any of the chokes. Like, you need to be, like, actually in on any of the chokes, right? But this is one splitting into 2 routes, right? So if I'm a big blue blob here and I come out here and I split both ways, I have to... Now I've lost my pressure on both the doors, right? Or if I'm a red blob, half red blob here, half red blob on the other side over there, I can still exert double pressure on this door. So you can see this is kind of, it's defender favored in terms of you have the crossfire going the other way, right? I mentioned the crossfire in that door, now the crossfire is defending this door, which is fine design-wise, but it makes this door very difficult to push off, when I think this, in my mind, should be your main combat space. If I had a goal in your map, it would be, hey, the flanks are overused right now. This should be where I want the main combat to go around, and you start designing your map around that, and watch your demos. Instead of caring about your balance rate, TF2 maps undeniably is going to have inconsistent balance. I promise you, if I go on with 2 of my friends, we could throw the playtest however we want, yeah? But what you should care about is it designed to play and is it playing the way I want to play? And they're going to be stupid pub players and they're going to fuck up, right? But your goal, I assume, in designing a pub map is to control that pub flow in the way that you want it to be. And the way I want it to be, in my mind, is for this to be the main combat space, not that one over there, okay? And the way I think I would do that is I would clear one side automatically. So instead of having this main door come out with a crossfire mentioned, I would probably move it over here to the right side on the high ground. And I'd have that left flank come out a little bit closer to the main, so it doesn't infiltrate as deeply. So it maybe come here. So you're really fighting over this entire space. So I almost want to move the staging area. I want to move the staging area from behind this glass panel to kind of like forward in this kind of space where you have the left flank comes out, opens here, and I probably cut out some of the middle stretch if it was me. This valley is kind of difficult to fight around and very awkward. So I'd have it come out there, basically in this main hold area with a door like that. You can fight up this ramp and both ways, two funneling into one door, right? So now the attackers have the focus on this door. And then I'd have this main come out on the right side, a little bit on the high ground, probably here. That way your chokes are kind of separate. And I know I just said that I prefer 3 choke over 2 choke or 2.5, but then this is the route I delete. So let's just like this route in general is just really, really ratty. It's literally a tunnel that transitions very poorly into like a bunch of turns that just dumps you out into a one-way drop down. One-way drop downs are, they're very dangerous to use. When you're using them as an attacker, it's obviously a committal route, right? Which isn't, it goes against that philosophy of what I mentioned, like a player actually playing, trying to value their life, and maybe that's what you want, but personally, it's unattractive for various reasons. I assume you made this a one-way drop so that the defenders can't abuse it coming up the other way, right? But if it dumps out into an exposed area, it's going to be really, really rough because these players are basically in a death box now, right? And I know this is probably a holdover, but very awkward geometry. What I would do is I would remove this route all the way around. I have that high ground there, I just mentioned that, right? And then, I'd move that door here. And now you have this high ground combat space, overlooks, they can, if they own that flank, right, you can see they can hold the space in front of the door. The flank bleeds out into the door and opens up this courtyard for the attacking team. And then once the attacking team owns this door, they have this entire front area, right? And because they own that flank after that, because I crossfire over into that flank, I trap that flank, I pinch it if they're held there. Now we own this space, we can pressure that door. I can pressure this door from this angle, and look, this is where the beauty comes through, right? This is a pretty tough angle to deal with because of how inset it is, right? Even though I'm peeking, I can't really do anything about player on the point, and obviously they have their inset here, and obviously if a player's across on the other side, this crossfire is really difficult to deal with, right? Because I'm dealing with this, right? This, I'm doing with like 3 things at the same time as soon as I peek, right? And the way you resolve that is by keeping this room you had. So what I would do is I would have the door there, I have a transition space back here, so I'm just gonna no clip because I'm cheating. Go here, basically like this, and then now, if I want to peek it far, I have a route and a rotation, right? If I want to peek it close, I have a route and a rotation. So now you have one sightline here peeking 3, right? But then you turn it into 2 by having a flank that rotates the other way. And then you also have an outset for the defenders to hold if they really want to hold that. And the beautiful thing, the absolutely beautiful thing, is while the defensive team is holding this forward space, right, while they have that forward door hold, there's no chance of them getting flanked because they can't be seen behind. So people feel comfortable knowing where the combat is coming from once again, see? But anyway, sorry, I'm gushing over my own ideas. How cringe, right? So yeah, overall, I'd move this forward. I have that door moved there. I'd cut off that large flank back, and I'd add the doorway here back around. And they seem small, but I think they really matter. Okay, in terms of defending holds, I had an idea for there being a forward hold, and I basically like that forward hold there. The 2 choke there, 1, 2. While red is forward holding, it's a 2 choke. Once red gets pushed back, blue has 3 options to push, but they still condense into the same 2 chokes. I think your routing is mainly fine here. The escapes aren't really offensive. Oh, I would probably axe this. Yeah, I don't really think this needs to exist. So, but by axing that, I think you could make this a wider space, which makes it a little bit more comfortable to spam the point from. This point, in my mind, feels a tad large. I don't know if it's just me. I feel like the scale is a little bit large, but I could be wrong about that. It's just kind of my impressions. Let's go delete these statues. Anything else I have to comment on? It almost feels like this is one of those degenerate engineer areas. You want them to build it and then get Ubered and die. But once again, with the glass, it kind of makes it a little pseudo-degenerate. I don't know. That's probably why most players weren't building here. You could do the classic pub design thing where if you really want engineers to build here, again, you're trying to engineer gameplay on your map, just put a full ammo pack. That's how you get engineers to say build here, which is why I think it's kind of weird you put it ammo back here in this kind of like death corner. Maybe you wanted players to commit to here, but it's just weird. So I know it's alpha, but when you have inset areas everywhere, it can be a little bit misleading. Okay, let's talk about... what do I talk about? Let's talk about transitioning into second, right? So generally what happens most of the time is you have a death ball that caps, right? One of the teams has capped, or sorry, has won the point, but they haven't won the point in terms of the game structure, right? So they own the space, but they physically don't own the point. So in payload, what happens is when you own space, there's a catch-up mechanic, which is the payload card slowly moving forward. In CP, if you think Mountain Lab is the perfect example, you win first, but then you have to sit there for 30 seconds while red respawns to capture the point. That's what your map does. It's not really offensive, but one of the things I think you do have to be careful about is there's two big problems, right? First off, good players realize that they don't need to be the one pushing a cart. Like, when you think of the players who actually make the real big difference in the game, those like 4 players who I was talking about, they know that if we just killed 9 players, instead of sitting on the point here wasting that advantage, the smart thing to do is to push as far forward as possible, right? And spawn camp the next door, so that once my team is done capping the point, pushing the cart, they can go all this space for free, and we don't have to fight through every inch, tooth and nail, right? So they push it. That's what I was saying in Highlander. That's the reason why wipes don't happen. Because if wipes happened, they're gonna go to your last and start spawn camping you and have one person push the cart, right? Or if it's an 80, they're already spawn camping you. They have one guy capping the point. That's all you need. Yeah. So when you have a slow cap, the risk you run as a defender is pub players don't always understand that. This is where timing is like, it's more of an art than a science, really. But if your cap is too slow, ironically what happens is your defenders will run so far forward that they'll feed, die, and then your last will roll. So when you say like, I don't get it, sometimes it's very attacker favored, it could be for this reason, because you've made it so defender favored that the feeding players run forward and die in another timed spawn wave, and then the players who actually know what are happening on last are left to like 4 people to defend. So again, don't read the stats about feedback or who won at last. Actually watch the demo and think about how you want your map to play for yourself, or else you're literally throwing darts blindfolded backwards while a monkey types on a, I don't know, all the bad things, yeah? Okay, so let's talk about this transition space. Do I need to open the door? No, I'm gonna leave it closed for now. So yeah, once you cap the point, you have 2 main routes to rotate to. You have left and right, yeah? The one that's inset backwards, there's absolutely no reason why you would cap the point and then use this route. It doesn't make any sense unless you're rolling out or something, right? So in terms of what routes you get, you have a low ground, and then you have a high ground spiral staircase, and then you have the far left route, which I said nobody would use. Already, the spawn is right... Force spawn is over here, right? So right edge of the map from the attacker's POV. So the left edge of the map is going to have the least pressure as an attacker, right? I mentioned the way you deal with forward rats, or with flanker rats, is you want an hourglass where they get fed back into this choke where players are rolling out, right? So, and at that point, if someone gets behind, despite there being an hourglass design, I think they kind of deserve it. Unless, you know, there's sticky jumping demo and you let your map do that. So, for the most part, I don't like how far out this map goes. Yeah, I'll go left to right again. I think you could literally delete this entire building, and the map would be better for it. So instead of letting players, if I'm trying to flank, and I know the spawn is over there, I just hug this right wall, and literally there's basically no chance anyone pressures me. Like, who the hell is gonna roll out, not taking this way, right? Not taking this way, not taking this way. Who the hell rolls out like this, right? So you have no chance of fighting anyone while they go all the way behind you. So I would delete this and close this. I would open this wall, but more about that later. And then this way, if I am trying to flank, right, you see I kind of get brought in, and there's a chance I'm exposed, at least by the rollout players. But I'll transition some other stuff too, but I just want to make that concept important to you, that you understand the way to deal with flankers, or with like rat flankers, is to have it boil into an hourglass where they get hit by the players rolling out. In terms of the other routes you have, Pig likes this room. He really likes this room. He says it's the most interesting geometry on the map. This kind of like, I don't know what to call this. It's not a spiral staircase, but it's kind of like a spiral geometry here. I didn't really have a strong impression of this when we played. I think it's not really a combat space. Like, it doesn't really make sense for people to be here because they wouldn't be holding here post-cap, and it's not a very good hold otherwise. The biggest thing that I thought was kind of like annoying was that I couldn't really identify silhouettes for like this sightline. Like, I can see it's just all red, and I was getting like shot in this kind of like corner sight line. Like, yes, it's my fault probably, right? But I really can't tell what the staircase or geometry looks like, and that could just be alpha detailing, but I really don't think that should be a thing. And the sniper on the sightline kind of watches 3 rotation routes. It's kind of weird. But yeah, for the most part, I don't really expect this area to have any combat here. I think a better player than me would think of every ability to forward hold in terms of, imagine none of your team wipes and there's a transitional forward hold here. If this was 2 choke, maybe it is problematic if I deleted that other route, right? But for the most part, I think this area is basically given up purely because the tag team is going to have some momentum out of this. It doesn't make sense for the defense team to rotate this far forward. But after that, what is your staging area to the next point is the important question. So staging area, you don't really want to have the attacking team push out of the staging area unless it's like a significant push. And the other thing about engineered teleporters, is one of the things I want to make sort of relevant, is your staging area, if it's too close to one side, it's going to funnel players one direction and expose the other side again. And the problem is you put a full ammo pack here. Remember what I just said? Engineers basically just build on top of the full ammo pack. That's what they do. It's like an instinct, right? So that means your teleporter is going to go here. It's just naturally. And that feeds players into one route. And then on top of that, you have a one-way drop down on the other route, which is problematic. So let me go over everything I'd readjust early. No. I'll talk about what I think about the area first, and I'll go over what I think about how I'd adjust it. So let's go left to right again. Okay, so this is the same thing I mentioned about your exit being caught. First off, this doesn't transition into anything, right? So that's purely for the defenders to like flood out. So there's no reason for an attacker to be in this room defending that door. So again, you basically have a flank route that bypasses the attack defense. Maybe if you're trying to make a pub map where the rolls don't matter and the points don't, nobody cares about the points, it's fine. But I think if you want to have like a flank route, it needs to have some kind of risk reward to it. You can't just like, hey, flank routes should exist because everyone likes flank routes. That's not true. And again, this wall makes it that you can't even see those players back there. I'll talk about that later. So this route, your exit is caught. That's really important, right? So if I'm trying to go left on the high ground, I want a high ground rotation, right? I'm a blue attacking player. I want to rotate high ground. I want to start spamming players using height advantage. Okay, there's a staircase there on the left side, which isn't really telegraphed, but I know it already because I played the map a little bit. If I go in through this door, players are shooting me. I go up here. I fight combat here on low ground because there's a soldier spamming down on me, right? Okay, I need to leave. I leave back out through the door, and I'm being shot the entire time. I'm shooting Gary in this door the entire time. And this left side even hugs the sight lines you spawn. And because it's a pit, I never talked about this before, but whenever you have a pit, like Borneo's Last is a really good example of this, right? The players approaching the pit have their feet seen first, and people see with their eyeballs, right? So you actually have a defender's advantage whichever way is pushing through the low ground, right? So if I'm standing here and I see the feet, it's really easy for me to shoot them first. If I'm standing on the other side and I see the feet, it's easy for me to shoot them first, right? But this hill is obviously less than the other one, so it's really easy to defend through the door simply based off spam, and that sightline is honestly a little degenerate. But anyway, moving on here, even if I transition onto this high ground, right, and I deal with all these hiders, you've made this incredibly difficult to push. This pack placement is honestly, frankly, ridiculous. But the question is, I've rotated on this high ground, I have space, what do I do with it? How do I convert this? Because one of the really important things about high ground when you're dealing with an attacker is how do I convert my high ground into an advantage, right? And for the most part, the funny thing is I just pushed up that staircase, I had my exit caught, I had to clear this corner, there's another soldier around that corner, probably. There's sightlines galore, I don't know if there's anyone there could be players on that high ground could easily rotate and crush me, and there's still more high ground over my door. Oh my god. So yeah, it's really the upward fight here. It feels like from this door, there's not really any transitional option you get. The best thing you can hope for is that they're distracted and you can somehow come up this flank completely exposed and come deal with these players. This feels incredibly backwards to me. Like, this is triple defender sided, right? So you have to fight with your exit caught, you have to fight up high ground, and then you have to come up this long slope where you're exposed into a loop around the other way. If the loop was reversed the other way, I feel like it makes sense, because then, okay, it's attackers, if they ever get here, can quickly clear this room, while the defenders have a long kind of like walk, or it's difficult to protect it. But no, it's pretty much the exact opposite. It's very easy to defend, and it's directly outside of spawn, and they can see you coming this way as well. So ironically, the attackers are the one caught by the defender rollout most of the time. So really difficult to kind of stomach around. The main door, what do you get for pushing the main door? You get exposed to 5 billion different sightlines, and then what are your options to push? So even if I am pushing up here, again, crossfire, 2 ways, 3 ways, 4 ways, looking down on one door, very difficult for me to clear through the door and then push it. But if I do manage to sneak through, especially hugging this right side, right? Blind right flank, have no idea what's there. Could be anyone on top of this rock, could be anyone on a health pack. Even if I rotate further out, I haven't cleared the other side. And then once I have rotated in, do I get high ground? Do I get safe ground? No. More sightlines. And completely exposed to player with class vision free over me, right? And oh my god, look at this high ground. You're down there? Dead. Sorry. You're coming through the tiny door? What are you going to do? Trying to fight anything here. Again, left, middle, right, too many routes to cover. You really kind of might be overdoing it on the ammo packs, especially out of spawn here. this ammo pack doesn't make any sense to me, because the defender is not going to need it, and an attacker is probably not going to need it. They're going to die in like the next 10 seconds or win the game, either or, when they're that deep. It's a little weird place for it. But hey, there was some talk about health pack placement. Maybe I'll think about that later. But yeah, this is not a usable route for the attacking team. Look how awkward the rotation is. I said Z before. This is like a U-turn and then another forward loop. So yeah, if you want this to be a transitional space onto the high ground, I think you need to think about that. Like if I'm an attacker, like how I want to rotate the high ground. A, telegraph it more, because remember we're dealing with pub players here. And B, make it more attacker friendly, because I'm not going to go out, expose myself to a doorway, and then go back in for it. Okay, and then let's talk about the real whammy. The tight route, which everyone was complaining about, that has no rotation onto high ground, and also is kind of a choke, and then also has easily spamming over it. So bad enough you have your engineer set up here. Bad enough that it's completely flankable by the other side. But now, the real kind of kicker is your entire team is feeding through this doorway. There's a high ground player over there spamming over the doorway, which they can do completely blind if they really wanted to. Yeah? And you can't fight him. I talked about this all the way back on the first point. You can't fight that guy. I'm not a class. If I'm not a class that can go up there, I'm not a class that can go up there, right? And even if I could get up there, I'm not going to do 3 crouch jumps off this tiny little prop and then deal with this tiny little ledge to fight him. He has such a defender's advantage on that corner. It's insane. Yeah? So instead, we're going to take the wide ground route. And I want the wide ground route where you can almost get the same beautiful crossfire I was talking about earlier, where you have a wide area that clears the high ground, and clearing the high ground lets people rotate up and like take the space, right? And the way I do that, instead of having the staircase inset all the way over there, I'd have the staircase out. And it's a little bit awkward because I think we're dealing with a 45 here, but I'm tempted to do it out like that. I don't know if you can see that. I kind of Z like that. So you can see from high ground I can clear this, and then these players can come up close, and the corner is cleared by the players who are watching from this space over here. So you can make this mild high ground. I make this a bridge over. I really don't like there being... this is a little bit dangerous because I call this crouch jump combat, right? You have a clear jump that needs to be made in combat. And this, I don't know if you did this on purpose. This height is like perfectly awkward to do like a flat jump against. Maybe it's just me, right? It's like the perfect height where you do a full jump, you have your peak, and then you transition to a walk. I don't know if that comes out on the video. Yeah, just a little bit weird. But yeah, the main complaint about this route is that you don't really have the ability to transition to high ground. There's literally no way to approach players fighting on this. And they, not only do they have high ground, but they have covered high ground, where if you think about it, right? So if I'm a player there, right? Pretend I'm a demo man, right? I can be spamming, and I'm just like a tiny head, while these players have their full body exposed. So it's covered high ground is probably what I should call it. And yeah, just to make it a little bit more offensive, if you do manage to push up here, right? So I managed to get up here somehow by doing this full loop-to-loop. There was players in the playtest who were here and here, and they had a medic up here somehow, right? So they did the full loop-to-loop. They went around here, they were here, and then they were completely exposed. I had no idea they were here. I just backed up here and just found the combo, right? That's just like, oh my god, what can you do? There's like 4 different routes. There's no way you can clear that back one. Now you're here dealing with this door, you're getting spammed across. You can't watch this lower. It's just, it feels like once the tag team gets this space, again, there's no real way to convert it, there's no real way to hold it, and there's too many routes that end up just kind of like rat flanking you. Well, let's talk about other areas. So yeah, pretty aggressive defender spawn time. I think this gun is just really, really brutal to deal with. It's really hard to spam out because, you see, I can't... Normally, I'd be able to spam, but you put a ledge there. If I go out further, at some point it sees me, and I can't... I'm caught in a corner, which I don't really want to do. As a demo man, I can't spam this because that's in the way. I can't spam this because this ledge is in the way. And I can't even spam from here because this ledge is in the way. So me trying to sticky the gun like this gets caught on all these ledges put on the map. So overall, this is really, really annoying gun to deal with. That I'd rather encourage having like more open areas and space, and like the gun should hold a backline, but I don't think it should be something where you have to only spam it once you already have a hold, and then look at the spaces you can spam it from, right? These are areas you push and then you hold very briefly. If you did own the spaces for a long period of time, you would have already capped the point. So the gun does its job of stalling, but it does so in such a brutal way, I don't find it very fun. Yeah, let me go over anything else. I think this lower area was probably really nice. I love this design, by the way. I call this gorge design, where red has some sort of initial or incentive or high ground, but then blue pressuring the point forces red off their high ground to defend it. I think that's always so elegant. But the way you really need to be careful about it is, if you think about gorge, once players feed into the pit, blue now gets the high ground over them. The pit is basically owned by them once red team loses control of their forward hold. Yeah, that's really important. So if it was your map, don't do this, right? But if it was like, okay, I put a level 3 on the point, and now it's if they drop down, I kind of own the point, right? And what's the one map? Swiftwater kind of does it too, right? They have a pit point where the pit is basically controlled by having players sitting very close to the ledge, and then once they get pressured out by any object, there's no real way to defend it anymore because the defending team has a good sightline to it. This is a bad sightline to it because red always has the same sightline that watches it, so it's never going to be powerful. Okay, let me talk about what I do, because I just mentioned a shit ton of changes, and now, sorry, I mentioned a shit ton of criticisms, but, you know, I care a little bit about suggestions and what I think about how to improve it. So, first off, this one-way shutter should just go. I think you delete this entire route, just, you know, like this transitional space here. There doesn't need to be a defensive flank. That's not a thing that needs to exist. Their job is to defend. They really shouldn't be on attack. That kind of, like, fucks with the game mode a lot. And then once you do delete that route, right, the question is, what is all this space? And like I said, I think you kind of want to hourglass it. So I'd cut all of this in. I mentioned I cut out that building. I'd probably cut probably to the rock. Like, I might literally hourglass it like that. Remove this wall because you don't need it now. And then now you have the ability, let me go back up. Now you have the ability to create a rotation route because this is open here. You would have a rotation route onto high ground there if you wanted. So that's one of the things I was playing around with a lot. I was just debating whether I liked it or not. I really feel like for this high ground, for what it is, it doesn't really convert into anything, so it wouldn't be too powerful if you allow the rotation up, because you still can't really convert for anything. The biggest thing you're worried about is if the defending team can push out using a better doorway down here, and I think the answer is largely no, as long as you keep it kind of like inset, where you can't go on the outer circle out. I mentioned that before, you have inner circle and your outer circle because your spawn's based there, so your players are always going to gravitate towards this side, so it's especially important that I think you cut this out and make sure you feed players into the kind of rollout. In terms of this space here, there's nothing really offensive here, but I also don't really think it's anywhere good to set up on. Like, you can see this, whenever you have design like this, I call this double door. It means this is really meant to be hard to push through, but I'm really not expecting any combat here. It feels like this should be like a wide open door, which is kind of like to help me stage, you know? Where I have a stage here, I should be able to rotate back into that quite easily. I kind of want to rotate into the high ground over the pit. You see, over the pit instead of into the pit sightline. That's kind of like my temptation. You know, Borneo kind of has, I don't know, why do you keep talking about Borneo? Borneo kind of has a ledge over so that you don't have to rotate in the sightline. Yeah, and I think that's maybe what you want as well. Just a way to rotate without kind of exposing yourself to the main area. In terms of actual rollout, I didn't really have anything offensive about that. I thought it was fine. In terms of this main route, I would be kind of tempted to do the same thing I mentioned on first, where you have your main route moved in, probably, I think, to this right side, just so that it's not in the huge main sniper sight line down there. And then this right route, I think you just allow the direct transition into high ground. No, you seal this off 100%, or you allow the direct transition to high ground. I think you seal it off so that you can keep your interesting combat space on the wide side and do what I mentioned with the staircase here, right? And then you have, oh my god, you have this area here I think you can work with, where either you make that into the main and you keep the side flank, or you move the main onto the other side, and then I think you probably cut this out completely and just use this space to make this high ground better workable for both sides. I guess as an attacking team, once I have this space, I can spam that way, and as a defending team, I can go down this way. I'm getting a weird light bug on that corner. I think you might have a gap there or something. As for this last hold, I'm kind of tempted, instead of having this wall here and this ledge for this transitional space, I would actually probably make it open. I think that would be slightly more interesting. So this would be a bridge across. You don't need this wall here. And then now you have a bridge that allows for rotation, a very brief kind of hold. And then if you're an attacker trying to convert something, you can actually use it. Because look how awkward it is to jump like that and try to convert it into something. But if it's a bridge, I can just walk on it. Even if it's not a favorable spam angle, it goes both ways, right? I think the spawn is a little bit too aggressively close. What I think is going to happen is if you have a spawn this close, the only way you're going to resolve it in a satisfying way is by yanking the spawn timers. So we're talking like 2008 TF2 25-second spawn timer, and that's the way you balance your map, just by bullying people with spawn timers, which I was never really a huge fan of. But yeah, let me think if there's anything else major I have to say about the map. I think I explained my core concepts. Let me talk a little bit about pack placement, because you had feedback going both ways. So this is classic TF2 maps, right? You're going to get feedback about two major things. One of them is the way something looks aesthetically. right? Whereas like, oh, this prop doesn't go here, or this theming doesn't make any sense. And the other thing you're gonna get is like the strangest nitpicks that don't make sense. Like I'll nitpick, right? I'll be like, oh man, you didn't clip this door and it's bothering me, or this rock is like out of position, or these packs don't really make much sense here. But tier 2 maps will just give you advice on like really inane shit about like extinguishing yourself from water. I don't know. I think the water should extinguish you, but I also like that you don't get submerged. But I also think you shouldn't have water in like main combat space. It should be something you can retreat back to. In terms of pack placement, I think you should focus on not having packs. Well, okay, so there's only two types of packs. There's packs you retreat to, and there's packs which are contested. You never really want to pack in a combat space. I think that's kind of degenerate when you have someone fighting someone and then they accidentally back them to the pack. If they can accidentally back them to a pack, it's a problematic pack. So, this is a little close to the window for my liking. I would probably put a pack in this space. Doesn't this space look like you could use a pack if it's a staging area? These packs are a little out of the way for what they are, just a small. It means if you're pushing this, like if I'm pushing this, right, and I'm stuck in this area, I don't have a pack to retreat to. I'm not going back to spawn. I can't rotate up main because the way's sealed, right? If I am in main, to get this pack, I'm going to expose myself to potential sightlines. Why? Why isn't this an attacker-owned pack? This is defender-owned pack, you intended a forward hold, but then you also broke it for some reason. Like, this area actually feels like it should have a pack now if you don't redesign it. This is such a stupid pack for it being a small. Who is this for, right? If this is for an attacker, like, it's a small in an area that is really awkward. If it's for a defender, I'm going backwards into a corner. It doesn't make any sense. This pack is really exposed for what it is. If I'm an attacker doing this, I can't do anything about that. If I'm a defender, why is it in the doorway on a corner? This almost feels like it should be there if it's a defender-owned pack. And then if it's an attacker-owned pack, I'd probably seal it on the other side, so kind of weird. And if it's a contested pack, it'd probably be where your forward spawn is, like against that wall rather than against that. Let's see, anything else? Spiral staircase, I mentioned, I'm just gonna ignore that. Yeah, that's weird. Low ground pack, that doesn't really make much sense to me. I almost feel like it should be in this transitional space. This transitional space feels like if you are blowing out and then you get stuffed at this area for some reason, there should be a pack to retreat to. I would expect like a pack like right here against this wall maybe. Maybe those packs as well. The full ammo pack here doesn't really make much sense to me. I don't know what this is for. Especially because, don't you have a full ammo pack there as well? Holy shit, man. Calm down on the full ammos. It doesn't make any sense to be forward holding here, in my mind, because pubs, but also defensively. For attackers, I don't think you need this full ammo either. Oh, maybe you're expecting a defensive team to use this to forward hold? That's another reason why I don't really like the super flank to Narnia, because it doesn't make this feasible. No, I don't really think this is a thing. You can't really forward hold here. It's too easy to advance up the pit or around the wide side. I don't really like this fence still. These packs... This pack I think is fine. Other pack, I don't like how it's inset on the wall. Because look, if I'm weak and there's players there and I want to grab this pack, I can't rotate this way because of the fence. So I have to go out, in, expose myself. So this is an attacker-owned pack based off how you put it against the wall, right? But why would an attacker be here with his exit caught? Because I can't leave that way, right? So now if I'm here, I'm committed to this. I'm fully exposed from the window, too. Like, oh my god, there's too many factors against me. There's a small health pack in the corner here. I think this is really, really weird, man. Like, what is this doing here? I feel like you wanted an attacker-owned pack. But I don't know, this kind of just gets abused by defenders sitting in this corner, living off this pack, being abusive here, being abusive there. Full health, generally don't like it. I feel like it should be in a retreating space instead. But it's okay. It's not really in like a major combat space, at least. Like if someone's retreating here, at least they're giving up ground for it. So it's a good trade-off rather than being, you know, like smack down in the middle or anything. Up here, you probably didn't want to give any packs because it's close to spawn. But like, I don't know. It's a little barren up here. I feel like this is where you'd probably want like a medium ammo, at least, so a player doesn't have to go back to spawn or be super reliant on an engineer. This low ground route here, again, I don't know why this is a full ammo. This medium, considering how close this is to the point, I don't like that this is a medium health. I would want to put it like back there or something, but that's so too close to spawn. So, I don't know. This is what I mean where I'd like more space to work with here, by blowing out that other area. Other side, medium ammo, but no health. Kind of weird. And then, yeah, this cliff one just makes it really easy to hold. I mean, this is a good health pack, don't get me wrong, I like it, but I almost feel like it should be on the other side of the wall, so the attackers have an easier time, but then you have to be on the cross, so you'd probably want it, like, back here, as long as it's not in the sight line. Yeah. I don't know, at this point I'm just rambling. This cliff route, largely unusable, because it's part of the road, as I mentioned before. Sightline immediately outside of spawn, pretty brutal to push, in my opinion. But yeah, there you go. More windows. That's my general opinion. As mentioned, these are just basically ramblings and thoughts. I encourage the map maker to reach out and contact me if you want to have a discussion or deeper talk about anything. Thanks for sitting through this video. I think that's all I have to say for now.